Hello and welcome to an exciting episode of IPRA Rec Room. We're coming to you virtually this time. A little change of pace for us. So sorry you don't get to see our sweet digs back at the office, but here we are. Today we have a great speaker with us, Gregory Offner. He will be the keynote at the IPRA conference. And then, of course, I'm joined by Marissa Moravik and Mark Dolphin, my co-host, and they will be taking you on a great interview with Greg. So enjoy.
Thank you, Vince. Greg, thank you for joining us today. We really look forward to kind of teasing what you have to offer here at the keynote speaker for conference, and hopefully that will entice some people that maybe are on the fence or don't go to show up and come out to your speech.
Well, thanks for having me. It's hard to believe anybody would be on the fence. I mean, this sounds like the can't miss event of the year if you're in the Parks and Rec industry. But still, hopefully this will convince anybody that may still be fence.
Exactly. I think the big challenge is most of us stay up really late the night before, and the keynote's kind of early. But I think after everyone listens to this episode, maybe does a little bit of research on you, they will make sure their alarms are set, they go to bed early, and they are ready to see you Saturday morning.
I love it.
All right, so we're going to get into a hard-hitting question first here. So what path did life lead you on to end up here with us on the podcast for IPRA and as the keynote speaker for IPRA IAPD Rising to New Heights Conference?
Man, you ain't kidding. That's a big question. Well, keeping it specific to your organization, I met Dwayne Smith during the pandemic virtually. I forget how we got connected, but he was looking for a speaker for a virtual event. And we talked about it. It seemed like a great fit. And ever since that experience I provided for his members, he had said, man, I'd love to get you out to our big in-person conference when we have it. Let's stay in touch. And so around about this time last year, I submitted an RFP like I think everybody else did. Dwayne saw it, emailed. He goes, Greg, I'm so glad you remembered. I saw the RFP. Like, this looks great. Everybody's excited. And as part of the selection process, when they ultimately decided on me, one of the things that I said, look, if you have a podcast or a newsletter, anything I can do to help sort of bring this message to the members even before the program to get them excited about it, I'm happy to do it. And they mentioned your podcast. I think maybe looking a little bit bigger in how I became a speaker, I think the audience needs to know that I started out my career in the world of dueling pianos. And so I was a dueling piano bar and a solo piano bar performer. And in fact, one of my favorite places to perform is the Redhead in Chicago. So I spent most of my life working at piano bars, which is a very interesting laboratory in which to study experience and engagement. And I used music as the vehicle by which to conduct these experiments, because I had a really interesting opportunity every night. I started with a new audience. And sure, we had some regulars that would come back night after night, but generally, you had 100 people in the room, maybe 85 or 90 of them were first timers or first time in a long time. And so my charge and my colleagues' charge was to take these strangers who all had different reasons and motivations for being there and get them engaged with the show, get them to eagerly participate, collaborate together, making different requests, and in some cases do the scariest thing most adults can think of, that's singing in public. So I've found that those lessons are not just applicable in the world of piano bars. Those are things that your members are struggling with too. How do they take folks, whether they are your consumers, their colleagues, or maybe it's the person you see in the mirror each morning? Maybe you're having a hard time engaging, reminding yourself of the passion that you have for the work. Well, how do you do that more effectively? That's what I was able to draw lessons from the world of piano bars and apply them to the world of business. And so that's how I became a keynote speaker, was pairing those two very interesting backgrounds together.
Very cool.
I'm jazzed up. I want to run through a wall right now. Like it's just inspiring just hearing some of those and like how you take a unique experience, like you said, of being in a piano bar and relating it to the corporate world and businesses and day-to-day activities. And like, for us, we're constantly looking at new ways to evolve, get people in, change things. And like, I think you have to kind of change a little something in your brain and be like, let's not go down the path that everybody goes on. How do we expand? How do we branch off and look at something? I think you being able to relate that from the piano bar to the corporate world is going to be a really interesting way to kind of teach people how to do that.
Yeah, we're going to have a lot of fun. And I mean, there's a lot in common between the world of piano bars and the world of business. And so that's why I think audiences are a little surprised when they walk into the room and see a piano, because at first blush, you don't think, oh, this is a conference about my business. So of course there's going to be a guy playing piano in the front of the room for our early morning keynote. But the beauty of your members and the profession that you're in is the connection between music and the outdoors or recreation, or let's just call it generally play. We can learn so much about ourselves and the work that we do through play. And your members, regardless of where they're at in the organization, that's their day-to-day charge. Bring that alive. Yes, we're providing services. And yes, technically at the end of the day, it is a business. But really what we're doing, whether it's in a piano bar or in your profession, is helping people play. And I think it's so fun to be able to bring that on stage in person for your members this January in Chicago.
Awesome. So you've kind of answered our second question, which is what do piano bars in the business world have in common? But as someone who absolutely loves a good piano bar, shout out to Big Shot in Arlington Heights. They have great martinis, great music, great entertainment. Now I feel like I need to go back. It's been a couple of years. Can you explain what a piano bar is? Like, what do you do at a piano bar? What makes it different from any other bar, a sports bar? What's the difference between a piano bar and any other bar?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's funny that you started out mentioning Big Shot's martinis, because immediately when I start talking about the piano bar is such a fun and engaging place, and we create this sense of camaraderie and this ability to participate that you can't find anywhere else, a lot of the people who are a little jaded in the audience go, yeah, vodka, hello. And it's true, that does play a small part in the experience. But if you peel back the layers of what we do in a piano bar, it's actually a highly engineered and structured experience. The audience may not feel that way, and that's by design. It's our job to make everything feel very spontaneous and actually almost a little wild. But the thing that piano bars do differently, if I had to just give you one thing, one practice, the differentiator, I think is best described with a scenario. And so imagine this scenario. Imagine it's January, we're all in Chicago together, and we decide to go take a tour of 10 bars, just picked at random throughout downtown Chicago. So we all pile in a bus and we start driving around. My guess would be that of those 10 establishments we would visit, all of them had some kind of music. If we walked in, it could be one of those mega touch things where you pick your own song. It could be the bartenders got Spotify plugged into the speakers and they're just playing their favorite playlist. Maybe there's a band. But my bet would be every bar has music of some sort. And then maybe 60%, maybe 50% of those bars had live music. Could be a guitar player. It could be a band. But only one of those bars would allow the patrons to choose every single song that got played throughout the whole evening. And that would be a piano bar. And the reason that the piano bar becomes such a high energy, collaborative, and engaging environment is because it's not a passive experience. It's an active experience. The audience, the performers, the bartender, the servers, everyone in that building has a role to play in creating an experience together that's better than anything we could do on our own. And that's a great connection point for business. Because when we come together as an organization, whether it's Parks and Rec, a hospital, a construction company, it doesn't matter the industry, the big benefit, the real compelling reason to come together and organize is to do something better, greater, bigger, more ambitious, to achieve that together, because we're able to achieve it together more easily, more quickly than we ever could if we tried to do it on our own. And so there's real power in this idea of the piano bar and this experience we create. And my question to audiences and my overall mission is, why can't work be like that? Sure, add vodka, maybe it gets a little better, but let's be clear. What could we do really that could make the workplace more engaging, more compelling, more collaborative? What could we do to make work leave people with a sense that they're actually more energized than they were when they first showed up?
Yeah.
That's the mission I'm on. And when folks attend the keynote, they're not just going to learn about these principles that I describe in my book, The Tip Jar Culture. They're going to see me bring them to life in what's probably the most engaging, high energy, and interactive keynote session they've ever participated in. And I want to reinforce that they've participated in. This is not a spectator sport that you're coming to see in January. You're going to be drawn into the experience. And so I'm really excited to be able to meet all of your members at this event.
I mean, it reminds me of, so we talked before we started recording that I'm going to Disney, and it's like your experience. Like, you go to Disney, they like curate for you, but you kind of pick your own adventure. I was thought about like, hey, when you read a book, you go, I'm going to pick either A or B. And then you go to the next page and then you pick A or B. It's almost kind of like you say, like piano bar, you are navigating the world of what the night's going to be, but allowing other people to decide how it flows. You have the map, but they just need to pick where you're going to stop on the map. And I think it's really interesting. I had an idea of like, is there a way to have programming in rec that you can almost choose your own adventure? Like, hey, week 1, A or B. Okay, now week 2, okay, can you do A or B from week 1, where it's interactive, but it's also now you're kind of guiding them along the path. Like telling your kid, I want you to do A or B. I don't care which one you choose, but I approve of both of them, but at least you're giving them options that you can at least know that what's the outcome the next week. You're kind of prepared for that.
Mark, that's such a great tie-in, because as you were talking about this before you got to the part about kids and choice, it is interesting that even if the choice is manufactured, the point is that we feel like we've had a say. Right. I have a 4-year-old and she wants options. Even if those options are the thing I know you would never, ever choose and the thing I want you to do, Yep. She has this illusion that she's made choice. And that gets her more bought in. I'll give you an example that happened last night. So we're trying to get everybody ready for bed. And we're doing Kim and I, the parents, are doing a really good job of making sure that our oldest, our 4-year-old, brushes her teeth every night. But every once in a while, we get pushback. And last night, we were getting quite a bit of pushback. And so for whatever reason, I said, well, hey, what if instead I brush your teeth and then you can brush daddy's teeth? I'm telling you, her face was lit up. She couldn't believe this was an option.
I heard about that. I've thought about the same thing with my kid, because I struggle in the morning getting them to brush your teeth. They're like, why do I need to do it? I'm like, because you don't want to go to school with stinky breath. They're like, I don't care. I'm like, well, I do.
Mm-hmm. And so this idea of choice is, let's go to the world of piano bars. If I want to get the audience a little more engaged throughout the course of an evening, one of the tactics that I might use is to take 2 request slips that are on the piano. And this might not even be what's actually on the request slip, right? But the idea that I'm bringing everybody into the experience even more deeply gets them fired up. And so what I might do is I might say, all right, I just got 2 $20 requests. These are big ones, folks. We got to do these right away, but I want to give you a choice because I got them at the same time. Do you want to hear Shake It Off by Taylor Swift? Or do you want to hear a mashup of Bette Midler's greatest hits? What do we want? Bette Midler? Everybody goes silent, right? Or Taylor Swift, and the place erupts. I was never going to play Bette Midler.
Right.
But everybody thinks they just made this choice together. So now everyone is fired up. And we can bring those same principles, that same tactic, into the world of business. Even if it's the illusion of choice, feeling like we, and I'm speaking about the business we, when we work together, feeling like we have a say is incredibly powerful. It's a force that engages, that drives collaboration. In the 1920s, there was a management philosopher. She's often called the mother of modern management. Her name is Mary Parker Follett. She was a proponent of this idea that power with is more sustainable, more effective, and more successful than power over. And you have to take this in the context of we were just going through and sort of on the tail end of this industrial revolution. And so we had taken industry, if you will, or business from the place of individual contributors working largely out of their homes or small shops to now this very regimented factory model where you effectively had workers and taskmasters whose job was to crack the metaphorical whip and keep everyone focused. And surprising no one, really, there was a lot of pushback to this. People went from a place of immense freedom to virtually no say in what was happening. And so Mary Parker Follett's hypothesis was if we just created an environment where people had a little bit of give and contribution, no matter where they were in the organizational hierarchy, to this experience, we'd get more buy-in, full stop. And you see this at the piano bar with that idea of a request slip. You know, I just gave an example of manufactured choice, but the request slip is a great example of actual choice. Now, I'm not trying to toot my own horn when I say this, but I'm a pretty competent musician. I've played for nearly 2 decades all over the world. I know how to create a great musical experience. And yet, by giving the audience the power of the pen, the opportunity to create their own playlist throughout the night, I always have a sensational experience in store for them because it's theirs. They chose the course that we're on. They charted the path themselves. Now, yes, I may decide, well, let's sort of wait on this request. We'll play this a little later in the night. We're at a high energy point right now, and this is a slower, lower energy song. So I'm doing a little bit of curating, but they're driving. And I think that's the opportunity that leaders have in the business world is to let go, seed the idea to the employee. And then as the leader, it's our job to say, okay, this is a good idea. And we're going to put this off to the side. Maybe that's a next year initiative or a next quarter initiative. This idea, though, let's act on that together. And one thing that individuals can do, no matter where they're at in the organization, to make that idea of theirs, right, that request slip, more powerful. Well, let's take the example from the piano bar. If you bring, and I've got request slips here. I don't know why I keep using these doggone post-its. So if you bring a request slip up to me at the piano bar and it doesn't have something green and presidential accompanying it, talking about money, right? If it comes up without any money, that's not a request. It's just a suggestion. And this is the problem that we have in business is that lots of people want to make suggestions, but very few people are making requests. And so whether you're just starting out your career, whether you're mid-career, whether you're a senior leader who's got to influence a board or other stakeholders, you've got to put some skin in the game. There's got to be some sort of commitment on your end that goes beyond just an email that says, hey, I have an idea. Why don't you do this? I mean, if you're a leader listening to this podcast, you've got a lot of things to do. You don't need more stuff on your to-do list. What you do need is someone who's willing to bring you an idea and say, hey, this isn't just an idea. Here's how I'm willing to start making it reality. That goes from suggestion to request. And I think all businesses, regardless of industry, even in parks and rec, even in government, they need more requests and less suggestions.
All right, so I'm going to pivot here. So I'm going to skip a question because I think we've kind of touched base on that. But kind of what you were talking about now is like, so my perspective, maybe Marissa's perspective, we're maybe middle of the organization chart towards the bottom, like not in that leadership role. Like, how would you suggest somebody that might have that request slip and help them get those ideas to something that's more of a reality? Like I've kind of thought what you were saying is don't just come with here's a problem or an idea, come with a solution as well. Like, is there another area or a way that people can kind of build on that to kind of push their ideas forward to kind of help them come to fruition?
Yes. And it's going to be different for each idea. Some ideas might be more technical or require, more funding. And so those are going to take a different path than an idea that just simply needs to start being done. For example, maybe the idea relates to information. If you had a little more information about participants in a particular program, you could tailor that program better for them. You could create a better experience. To me, as an outsider, that doesn't seem like it's very onerous or very difficult to do. Just start asking for that information and let's see what happens. So almost create your own proof of concept, or in the tech world, they'd call it an MVP, a minimally viable product. And in some cases, if it is a larger idea that requires more funding, go ahead and think that idea out to the best of your ability. Now, I'll come back to that, actually, how to make it practical, but let me share a story with you of an organization that's done a great job of putting this request slip idea into practice. So there's an organization in Western Pennsylvania, and they're in the home healthcare business. So most of their employees work out in the field, and they are home healthcare workers. They're going into other people's homes, apartments, living situations, and they're assisting someone at varying levels. Could be a lot of assistance. It could be just a little bit of assistance each day. But they're working in what the traditional name for would be a non-traditional work environment. And so this is inherently more challenging than if you or I go into an office. There are rules and regulations, how wide corridors need to be. Are they accessible? That all goes out the window in somebody's home. You might be walking into a house where they have newspapers stacked up, all along the hallways, or you might be walking into, a palace. You're never sure day to day. So it's a very stressful work environment. And this organization was dealing with the problem of lackluster employee engagement and high turnover. So they wanted to change this, and they knew they needed fresh ideas. So they hired a chief innovation officer. This guy's name that they hired was Bruce. Now, Bruce didn't come from the home healthcare sector, but I think that became an asset for him because he looked at the organization differently. The first day Bruce came in, he started executing on a leadership philosophy that Abraham Lincoln called MBWA, manage by wandering around. And so Bruce just wandered around and chatted with people and watched what was going on. And after a couple of weeks, he realized that gathering input from people in the office was easy. Gathering input from the people in the field was a little more challenging. They didn't have a mechanism for this. And he wanted to incentivize people to share their ideas. But he also knew, like we just talked about, leaders are getting too many ideas and not enough opportunities to execute. So he wanted to make sure that it wasn't just suggestions coming in, they were request slips. So one night, Bruce is sitting at home, thinking about this in the back of his head, but maybe like we all do, just sort of like mindlessly thumbing through TV. And all of a sudden, a show comes on, Shark Tank. And he got this idea. He's watching this show, and if you've seen Shark Tank, you know that it's several entrepreneurs and a bunch of innovators or wannabe entrepreneurs pitching their idea, saying, all right, this is my idea. This is what I've done so far to execute on it. This is how it's succeeded so far. And these are the challenges. And this is the help that I want from you. And Bruce thought to himself, what if we could take that idea and bring it into our organization? What might that look like? And so Bruce started scribbling some ideas on a piece of paper. The next day, he looked at the piece of paper, crossed a few out, said those aren't going to work, scribbled some more, went into the office and had a conversation with his boss. He said, I want to start a Shark Tank. And his boss looked at him, because you're crazy. No. Like, hear me out. If Shark Tank is all about ideas and execution, how could we bring that to life here? You want me to innovate. Here's what I think we could do. And Bruce started to lay out his plan. Bruce said, I need to find 5 senior leaders in the organization to be our sharks. And what I'll do is set up a quick, simple form for any of our employees to use. And all I want them to do is answer 3 questions. I want them to answer the question, what's your idea? How does that impact the business? And what do you think we should do differently? How would we act upon this? How would we make some progress towards your idea? So his boss said, okay, sounds low lift. Let's get it started. We'll give it a pilot run. So they picked 5 executives. They put the email template together and they told employees, if you have an idea, use this email template, send it to us. We'll vet them. And so they started getting ideas from the field. And it was in this very simple format. What's your idea or what's your issue? How does it impact our business? And what do you think we should do differently? How would we go about implementing it? And so the sharks got together, all 5 senior leaders got together, and they read through these email submissions. Any that weren't in line with their corporate culture, they just sort of tossed to the side and replied back, hey, thanks. We appreciate you telling us what you think and keep the ideas coming. But that was only a few. They were left with multiple ideas that were in line with corporate culture and might actually be great if implemented. So they decided to invite those employees into the office to do a pitch, to elaborate on their email submission. Now, this wasn't a pitch like in Shark Tank where you had to know financial figures and stats and they didn't have to go that deep.
Yeah.
They just wanted to hear them talk about this idea, how much passion was there. And at the end of their pitch, one of the senior leaders, one of the sharks, might make them an offer. And the offer was very simple. We're going to collaborate on this together. Now, here's the beauty of that offer. It doesn't take any financial investment on the part of the company. But now we're building a relationship between a lower level employee or an entry level employee and a senior leader of the organization. So these employees now feel seen and heard. When they work on this idea together, this lower level or entry level employee can't help but absorb some of the information that the senior leader has. So now we're getting on the job training and development at a very high level. They're learning more than just their roles and responsibilities. They're learning how an executive looks at the organization. So now we're maybe inspiring or at least empowering somebody to take a larger role in the organization. And as this process went on, these sharks would develop an idea from just a little email template to maybe a first round of testing and development, and then a second round of testing and development. And to date, this initiative has produced several fantastic ideas, but more importantly, it's increased the employee engagement and increased the retention of their talent. So they implemented a very business version of a request list and saw great success. So how does that relate to someone in your industry that wants to move an idea forward? Well, sketch it out. Think about what steps might have to take place. If there's a financial investment that's required, let's pretend you got the investment. Just make believe it's already there. What would happen next? Then what would happen next? And try to envision what resources you might need. And if you're not right, or if you don't know, that's okay. The fact that you're bringing this fully thought out idea to a leader, it's not just a wish now. You've actually put some time, you've put some energy, some effort into it.
Can you guys hear that?
The fire alarm is going off.
I was thinking our fire alarm was going off. I was like, it's weird because it's not going off in my office. So I don't know why.
That's because this idea is so hot, it's on fire.
I love it. Well, I do think this is a good idea. So like I've worked for many different park districts and currently work for the Mundelein Park District. And back when I was at the Vernon Hills Park District, we had started the concept of like an innovation committee. And the Oak Brook Park District, Oak Park Park District was working on an innovation committee. They had one established. It was amazing. So we went out there, we learned from them. And then once I got here to Mundelein, the thought had come up again about an innovation committee. And we actually had a meeting the other day, and I have now been tasked with creating a scavenger hunt for our community. But I like the idea of not having it stop there, that it's not just up to the employees at my level to come up with the idea and start running it. Have our executive director come in, have our director of finance, have our director of parks, our director of recreation come in, have us pitch the idea to them and get the buy-in from them, and then maybe have one of them partner with us to make this become a reality. So I think that it takes that innovation committee one step further, and it creates more of a relationship than just, okay, me as a rec supervisor is now going to create this scavenger hunt for the community to get more people involved in more of our facilities. It's now business services can see what we do and how we create a program and, the step-by-step process, or maybe it's the parks department that's, collaborating with us. So I really like the Shark Tank idea and taking what we as possibly some parks and rec organizations, like I said, there's at least, maybe 2 or 3 of us who are doing it that I know of, but taking it one step further and then including upper management to build relationships, build that community within our organizations, and have some collaboration.
Yeah, the collaboration is key. And just asking people may even pleasantly surprise them. Just to be asked, what do you think about this? How would you add to this idea? What did we get wrong? Just asking is going to go so far, especially if you're not really don't have a culture of doing any of this collaborative research yet.
Yeah, so I'm definitely going to be taking this back to our innovation committee next month that, we should start getting some upper level management involved. Because Mark has to mute himself right now, I'm going to steal his question. How do we take priorities that are probably a little different from programmer and upper management perspective? Oh, actually, we just answered this and work on them together. So if you have any other, thoughts or comments on that, but you kind of already answered it.
There's another practice that may be valuable to chat about just for a moment, which is keeping with this theme of Shark Tank and investments. Can't remember if it was first or second grade, but our teacher had this bank, this imaginary bank that was created for math class to help us envision what it meant to save and how to budget. And so she had these buckets. And each day in class, if we did our silent reading, without getting up and trying to bother other people or run about the room, we'd get a ticket. Instead of money, we would get a ticket. And if we were good at recess and didn't get hollered at, you'd get a ticket. And if you put all your stuff away, you'd get a ticket. And so ultimately, we could put these tickets into a series of buckets that were things the class could do. We could have an extra recess time. We could have a guest storyteller, come in and read to us, which was generally like the principal or something. But they were things that we all might benefit from that we got to collectively vote on. And so if you flip the model where the sharks are at the top and they're deciding what projects to go forward, there's another way to do this where the executives curate a list of initiatives that they'd love to act on in a particular period of time. It could be a fiscal quarter, it could be a fiscal year, whatever. And then the employees earn tickets or earn votes through, it could be something as simple and maybe silly as perfect attendance or great attendance. It could be something like comments that come in from guests or from consumers. You can pick the metrics that work well and drive your business goals. But then at the end of the quarter or whatever period of time you want to designate, the employees get to vote, and each one has a certain number of votes. If they want to get more votes, they have to exhibit more of those good behaviors or business initiatives that you want them to act on. And then they get to apply those votes or those tickets to whatever idea they're most excited to see. So this not only drives business results throughout the period of time, but it also drives engagement and buy-in in whatever new initiative you're trying to put into place.
All right, now that the fire alarm is gone and we can touch base, I don't want to disregard what you just brought up, but I want to talk about that Shark Tank thing because it's very ironic. I feel like you're in my brain right now, Greg, because I'd say earlier this year, first quarter, January, February, I had the same exact idea. And I actually went to my department head and said, I think we need to put together a committee that is a Shark Tank committee and have somebody from each department sit on this committee where we bring ideas and you say, hey, we got 5 ideas this year, but we only have funds or space for 3. And these are the ones we're going to pick based off of the priorities, kind of like this question you talked about. What's the priorities of upper management, the park district, executive director, and how do you filter those in? But giving people, like you said, the idea to present an idea that not just middle management is understanding, but high level managements are listening to and understanding. And so we are going through a master plan. We're starting that process up for our park district. And I think it would be very valuable to have that as a committee, as a task force to kind of figure out how we can kind of push what the public wants from us forward while also engaging the underlevel staff and everything. So it was just, you were talking about it and I was just like, oh my gosh, like that is definitely something that I thought of and like think other places should do that. And I think Park District last year had like an innovation, like job title, like posting, like they were looking at, like you said, that guy, Bruce, how can I bring somebody that might not be from our field that can disrupt us in a positive way by looking at things in a completely different viewpoint? Because that's where you learn a lot and you see those gaps by looking at things from the other direction. So I just kind of want to touch base on those things and kind of, my thoughts on the Shark Tank, because I love the idea and I think we need to use that more in the Parks and Rec field.
Yeah, it may be slightly different in your industry, but in sort of like, capital B business, 2 seats at the table that I see go unfilled more often than not. And when I say at the table, I'm talking about the decision-making table, in the words of Hamilton, the room where it happens, are the voice of the customer and the voice of the employee. And so this idea of an innovation officer, whether they're inward or externally focused, I think is one that any organization should play with. Even if it's not a standalone position, it's just an additional role or responsibility that's assigned. And the other position is this idea of an employee experience officer. And that could tuck into HR, it could go in a myriad of places, but it's really focused on what is the experience like working here. Right. And I'm not talking about kegerators and lounges and, funny hat Fridays or stuff like that. I mean, what is it actually like to be told you're in charge of picking up the trash today, right? You're in maintenance or whatever. What is it like to do that job?
Right.
How do we remove friction? How do we increase collaboration? And how do we let people see the impact of what they do? And I believe that that's one of the unique things in your industry, in the world of Parks and Rec, is that you are intimately or very closely connected with your consumer at most levels. I think there's probably senior levels where you're not out seeing the programming so much. And God, you may forget what the joy is all about. It feels more administrative and it feels like you're head down in numbers and spreadsheets. But keeping people connected with the impact of their work is so critical. And I experienced this challenge during COVID, I think pretty acutely, because in the world of piano bars, there's immediate feedback. When I do a good job, when we play a good song, your eyes light up, the room goes crazy, there's applause. When I started doing virtual piano bars, at the end of the performance, I turned off my camera and the room was silent.
Yeah.
It was eerie. And it was then that I had the biggest challenge keeping my passion for the music, because it felt like, I got to turn on the Zoom and play the songs and turn off the Zoom. It felt pretty mundane.
Yeah.
And so keeping that connection with the experience and keeping innovation alive, whether it's internal or external, is so vital.
And I think too, from my perspective, I'm kind of transitioning out of like physically programming And my dad always told me a story. He worked for General Electric's fixing appliances for 35 years. And he's like, people would make the products, but they're not the ones fixing or dealing with them. So they're saying, yeah, this works perfect. And they're like, yeah, but that's on the floor behind a cabinet, like in a space that I can't reach. And I'm trying to look at now with my transition of how do I still keep in touch with those programs, those customers, when I'm not programming, so that I don't lose that edge of what actually the customer experience is going through and be like, well, just do this. But really not thinking about, well, that doesn't logically make sense because of X, Y, and Z. And the higher up you go, sometimes you can lose that touch. And it's how do we bring that back to make sure that everybody understands from the customer's perspective, from the front desk who's answering the phone calls for 8 hours a day and like what they're dealing with. And so, yeah, it's I think difficult of how do you move up? How do you keep that in touch with what's really happening?
Mm-hmm.
So, all right. So now we talked about Funny Hat Fridays and kegerators and everything. So we're going to end with what would your dream rec room look like? If you could pick any room space, what would you throw in there?
I mean, if we're going hog wild and just crazy, I'm saying like a half rink hockey rink.
Okay.
I play ice hockey, so it would be my dream to have some sort of room or even a backyard where we could have like a half ice sheet of hockey room. If we're talking inside, got to have a side-by-side skee ball, big skee ball fan over here. Maybe one of those bubble hockey machines.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah. Can you put like a bourbon room in a rec?
Whatever you want in there. We've had bars, we've had a lot of booze. Everybody has kind of touched on that. So
yeah, so definitely a little bit of bourbon. And then something that we've kind of curated here. It's interesting. I would joke during the pandemic that if 10-year-old Gregory could see me now, because I basically have a TV studio and a recording studio all in one because of the virtual keynotes and the programming that I've done. But I think certainly like a music studio with all the bells and whistles and fun stuff that you could play with. That would be a part of my rec room.
Would you put a tip jar in there?
Oh, absolutely.
No pun intended.
Absolutely. Yeah, you want to get in, you gotta tip.
Right. If you got a request slip, we got to have some green presidents with it, right?
Yep.
All right. Well, this is awesome. I encourage everyone to visit Big Shots in Arlington Heights. A ton of fun. And then this is also your reminder to sign up for conference so that you can see Greg in person, do the full package, make sure that you get to see the keynote speaker. It's time to renew your memberships. And then, Mark, is there something I'm missing? I feel like there's a third one.
Awards nomination. Make sure you nominate for awards. Yes.
Yes. So make sure that you guys do all of that.
Well, again, we really appreciate it, Greg. Look forward to seeing you at conference and the presentation, the keynote speaker, and hopefully this kind of got some people to be like, whoa, I really need to come to this if they were, again, on the fence, which we know they shouldn't have been on the fence in the beginning. So
I can't wait. It's going to be so much fun. Like I said, it'll be the type of keynote experience. If you miss, you're going to kick yourself when you find out what happened in the room. So if you haven't yet signed up, make sure you do. I'll be there in Chicago. I'll be hanging out afterwards. I'll have some books there and be chatting with people. So please make time to come see it, say hi. You're going to learn a lot. You're going to have a lot of fun.
Thanks, Greg.
Thank you for having me.